Hey everybody. Once again, thank you to D'Angela for inviting me back to speak about Prince. And it's always an honor to be here, but I'm particularly thrilled about this year because this is actually my favorite Prince outfit. So let's jump right in. As Prince states in the lyrics of Raspberry Beret, something about the clouds in her mixed. The more I started to look into Prince and the iconography of clouds, the more I realized there was truly something about the clouds for him, right? The motif of clouds would appear throughout his life in his clothing, instruments, lyrics, studio space, and films and videos. And in his memoirs, Prince, he actually states his fascination with clouds as a young boy. Quote, I loved to play outside and felt completely free with no ceiling. Clouds seemed like home to me. So, this idea of freedom or living with no ceiling was one of his key philosophies, and he would continue to reject any societally imposed limitations on his artistic expression throughout his life, as we all know. So for this talk, I will begin with a close reading of the iconic cloud suit worn in the Raspberry Beret video, and then explore the significance and inspiration of clouds for Prince. So first off, the cloud suit was designed by Prince's design team, Lewis Wells and Von Terry. And here we have Von discussing the conception of the cloud suit at D'Angelo's Erotic City Symposium last year.
This is another very iconic outfit.
Yes.
Raspberry Beret video. Talk to us about the cloud suit.
The cloud suit. This is probably one of my most sought after archive pieces. Only one. It's kind of like that beating one that got away. We love this. Sent this out somewhere. I don't know what the artist was that hand painted that. I'm going to recreate that. Sorry, Paisley. I'm going to recreate that because I love this concept. And it was just something about this whole cloud thing that came out of the design concept around the world in the day, you floating in the stars, and how do you do that? The fabric was, horrible to work with. Once it came together, it was just awesome.
It really was.
And fantastic.
Yes.
And I didn't even know. I'm just looking at it like, did I do this? I mean, sometimes you just impress yourself as all the collaborative elements come together that you can't raise your hand and say singly, this is me. No, this is us. This is us. Let's just come with it. This is us. And that's one of them, this is us right here.
Yes.
Well said. I love that. All right, so we have the structure and the lines of the cloud suit are nearly identical to the patterns that were used to make most of Prince's 1984 to 1985 Purple Rain tour costumes or suits. And this one on the left dates from 1999 and the tour at 1982. And it's one of the earliest pieces in the Paisley Park collections. As you can see, these silhouettes were comprised of short double-breasted jackets with exaggeratedly wide shoulders and a mandarin collar and lapel shapes that sort of were reminiscent of dandified era jackets without the tails, of course. And we've got high-waisted pants, asymmetrical button fly to accentuate his tiny waist, and then the ruching down the legs, as well as the cloth-covered high-heeled boots, really elongated his legs. And the boots were from Los Angeles shop Andre Number One. And we, of course, have the iconic three-tiered ruffled jabot blouse in white with pearl buttons, puff sleeves, and decorated cuffs. And this was one of designer Marie-France's contributions to Prince's look at this time. Now, this look originated with the Blitz kids from the famous Soho Club in London circa the 1970s, 1979, 80. After David Bowie featured the Blitz kids in his Ashes to Ashes video in 1980, the new romantic subculture drew a spotlight from mainstream culture and sealed the deal with the Adam and the Ants Prince Charming video. So we have him donning a pirate swashbuckling costume and embodying a really romantic, escapist, and queer-friendly vibe. And Adam and the Ants drew from designer Vivienne Westwood. You can see her work on the right here, and this 1981 Autumn-Winter Pirate collection in London. And this bespoke tailoring from Jim Sharon's pattern started to transform Prince's overall style and really solidify his identity as a rock star dandy. And he wore the cloud suit for the filming of the Raspberry Beret just 2 months after the Purple Rain concert tour ended. As Von Terry stated, the clouds were hand-painted onto the blue silk fabric of the suit and the boots. And although this is the same pattern as the previous Purple Rain tour era suits, this bright blue and hand-painted cloud motif really bring a different dynamic to the look, which, coupled with his new bowl cut hairstyle and the Technicolor backdrop of the video, this really seems to punctuate a style era for Prince when there isn't a lot of other iconic styling happening at this point. Although, I mean, only Prince could get away with that bowl cut. I'm sorry. Still looking amazing. So from this suit, we see the patterns and styles drastically evolve into his parade era and the costume design for Under the Cherry Moon by Marie-France and Lewis and Vaughn. So this black and white paisley suit on the left here is a transitional look, in my opinion, and the jabot button blouse is still there, but it's actually made of the same printed fabric as the rest of the suit. And so it doesn't really contrast as much. It's not as striking as it is in other iterations. And we can see below this gold sparkly suit, the same pattern is used for that one, as well as the tuxedo, the famous tuxedo up top. And we have, they're different cuts, right? The pant legs are different. They're straight leg rather than ruched. The jacket's still form-fitting, but it's slightly longer and it's single-breasted, right? The mandarin collar is still there. But then we see the rest of the looks in Under the Cherry Moon and really diverge from this pattern. We see him wearing much more feminine looks with lace, backless designs, unconventional draping, the low-waisted flared pants, flowy beadwork, and of course the infamous asymmetrical button-down crop top from the Kiss video and the cover of the Parade album, which is the soundtrack to the film, as we all know. All right, so back to Raspberry Beret. This was directed by Prince himself and produced by Simon Fields. And the cloud motif, of course, continues onto the set of the video shoot. So it's inspired by David Hender's album cover art that I'm sure we're going to be talking about if we haven't already today. So it's depicting this colorful, diverse, and inclusive utopic world with a psychedelic dreamlike atmosphere. And Hender states that this cover painting was, quote, indeed inspired by the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album aesthetic. Adelifu Nama states that the cloud suit really evoked the dreamy romanticism of the song and that it was Prince's most perfect mid-tempo pop ballad that framed a nostalgic narrative of youthful romance. So the video, it opens up with a crowd of people line dancing in unison. Second. And after Prince walks around and then onto the circular stage in the middle of the dance floor, let's wait for it a second. Here we go. So they're just line dancing. We've got the green screen aesthetic, gives an even more surrealist vibe. And here he comes. And we've got this woman, Jackie Swanson, dressed in Purple Rain cosplay, adoringly handing him the cloud guitar and looking up at him as if he's some sort of a god. Of course, this wonderful woman here with the yellow version of this suit is really focused here. And that's yet again one of those Jim Sharon patterns from the Purple Rain tour suits. And so the cloud guitar, of course, will appear in different iterations and different colors in Prince's universe, but we, of course, recognize this white version from the Purple Rain plot. The narrative of the catchy song, of course, is animated by Drew Takahashi of Colossal Pictures, and he would later create the Istanbul video for They Might Be Giants and Bobby McFerrin's Don't Worry, Be Happy video. And so, of course, this animated video version of the woman wearing the Raspberry Beret she sports this celestial print dress, and her hair eventually transforms into clouds. And we, of course, have the white doves as a Christian symbol for peace at the bottom here. And this juxtaposition of sexuality and spirituality is ever present in Prince's music during this era. We also see this dichotomy in Under the Cherry Moon in the final scene. And here's the video for Mountains. The film's narrative ends and the video for this song plays through the credits, beginning with, as you can see here, this cloudy sky, and the revolution just floats down from heaven as Prince is sitting serenely on a white fur rug that kind of resembles a square cloud. And this black and white buddy comedy ends with a plot twist that transforms into a tragedy when Prince's character, Christopher Tracy, is murdered and becomes a Christ-like figure. Throughout the video, we're transported to a heaven-like space with alternating images of clouds and the sea, in addition to some children frolicking in a field and new images of Mary, Prince's love interest in the film. Mary is wearing a beret, perhaps a reference to the Raspberry Beret song, or simply a French cliche. And the song ends with the band floating back up to heaven in the clouds. And then, of course, 2 years later, we have this one. The video for I Wish You Heaven from the Love Sexy album is released, and we see this religious and spiritual iconography of clouds and the heavens yet again. And Matt Thorne reminds us that, quote, Prince defines love sexy as the feeling of falling in love with the heavens, but goes on to speculate that, quote, this seems linked to a cosmic oneness following ejaculation rather than going to church. Thanks, Matt, for that. So the first image includes a backdrop followed by an apple plucked from the tree and bitten. This backdrop, of course, represents the Garden of Eden and the loss of innocence triggered by Eve biting into the apple. And this video is also quite dreamlike in its surrealist images floating in constant motion from right to left. We've got a gun, mirrored hearts and stars, peace symbols. Cat Glover, Bonnie Boyer, and Sheila E are dancing and playing the drums. Prince resembles an 18th century fop with a Mozart hairstyle and ruffled open blouse. Everybody but Bonnie is dressed in white, evoking purity and innocence and this mirroring of the heavenly clouds. And the cloud guitar makes another appearance. This time it's in blue. And so we really see music in the tangible forms of the instruments, right? The drum and the guitar as this force connecting sexuality and spirituality in this highly symbolic imagery. So fast forward to 2014 with the release of Artificial Age. And of course, this seems even more ahead of its time today with our infinite panic-ridden discussions of AI and the release of his third single, the third single on the album Clouds on August 24th. So yet again, we see clouds in the album art and in Prince's celestial third eye glasses. I think another shout out to John Lennon and the Beatles is maybe relevant here with this Imagine album art might have been an inspiration. We have, according to Fred Mark Shaheen in his article on Joni Mitchell and Prince, the lyrics here are really referring to a different kind of cloud that can get in the way. So unlike the pre-digital eras in which we see the celestial, spiritual, dreamlike references of clouds, we've got the references of like invisible cloud storage well into the ubiquitous age of this internet era, right? Critiques our tendency to prioritize technology over experience in real life. So the refrain contains the lyrics, quote, never underestimate the power of a kiss on the neck when she doesn't expect. And Shaheen interprets this as Prince really insisting on face-to-face engagement, an experience that all the tech in the world cannot replicate. Quote, we'll get to something higher that doesn't require clouds. No, we don't need no clouds. So as we look around today at the damages that over-reliance and trust in social media and apps have created, once again, Prince was ahead of his time, stating back in 2010 that the internet was, quote, completely over. Speaking of Joni Mitchell, we cannot ignore her seminal album Clouds and the clear influence her music and lyrics, particularly on Around the World in a Day album, have had on Prince's music. We're all familiar with his 2007 cover of Case of You, and then him entitling the Times' third album, Ice Cream Castles, lifted, of course, from Mitchell's 1966 Both Sides Now song from this album. And Matt Thorne reminds us that Prince was listening to Mitchell's The Hissing of Summer Lawns when he was working on Around the World in a Day. In his article, Shaheen delves into a rather thorough study of the two artists' connections over the years, including a comparative analysis of their legacies. And I'm not an expert at all on Joni Mitchell, so I will quote Shaheen on her using, quote, clouds as a metaphor for love and life. So many things I would have done, but clouds got in my way. And Joni comes to the realization that what we see of things are merely illusions, and we never really know the thing itself. I really don't know life at all. So here we have yet another interpretation of clouds as obscuring vision and signifying a lack of clarity, perspective, and perhaps judgment. I want to also highlight Mitchell's propensity for fashion as another connection to Prince. Herself stated that in high school, her identity was wrapped up in her style as an artist and a dancer. In Green, Kaiser, Doty, and Struck's article, they explore Mitchell as a style icon and analyze her music to uncover themes related to fashion, textiles, dress, and appearance throughout her lyrics and album art. They argue that understanding Mitchell's biography and learning about details such as her desire to become a fashion designer at a young age or her knack for starting fads in high school and knowing the quote mechanics of hip help us better contextualize her creative work. Now, this idea of understanding what it means to be hip leads me to address Mitchell's use of blackface beginning in the 1970s and throughout the 1980s, in particular as the Black masculine character Art Nouveau. In fact, this ugly chapter in Mitchell's career is connected to Raspberry Beret. The reference to the five and dime boss, Mr. McGee, was most likely from McGee's General Store in Mitchell's Paprika Plains track on her Don Juan's A Reckless Daughter album. Mitchell is dressed in blackface on the album cover. So delving deeper into this problematic aspect of Mitchell's legacy is really beyond the scope of this paper, but I didn't want to ignore it, especially since I hadn't seen any references to this in the articles I researched on her fashion legacy or connections to Prince. While some other biographers skirt around this issue, music journalist Ann Powers attempts to navigate this in her 2024 biography, Traveling on the Path of Joni Mitchell. All right, let's get back to the clouds. Here we have some surrealism references, and I really think that the clouds in the Prince universe evoke René Magritte's work, Belgian surrealist painter active throughout the first half of the 20th century. Surrealism was a radically political art and literary movement inspired by the subconscious and dreams, questioning values and norms, and searching for freedom. The Surrealists were also known for finding inspiration in jazz music introduced to European audiences during and after the First World War by Black American musicians. Magritte describes his paintings as, quote, visible images which conceal nothing, they evoke mystery. It does not mean anything because mystery means nothing either. It is unknowable. And the parallels between his enigmatic work and Prince's preference to remain mysterious himself are palpable and definitely require more investigation. His work heavily influenced the development of pop art, and we also recognize this green apple used by the Beatles for their record label. And one last fashion reference. So Elsa Schiaparelli was an Italian fashion designer during the 1930s in Paris, and she also famously incorporated surrealist imagery into her designs, and you can see the clouds on these two pieces here. I'd like to conclude with the entry hall of Paisley Park back in Chanhassen, Minnesota, and the cloud motif manifests yet again in Prince's preferred space. The clouds are quite striking in this space that now also houses his ashes. A site for spiritual transcendence and a reference to his faith are clear as we know Prince was profoundly religious thanks to Erica Thompson's research. Going back to Prince's statements in his memoirs that I loved to play outside and felt completely free with no ceiling, clouds seem like home to me, we're reminded of his continuous quest for freedom or living with no ceiling. Now, I've talked quite a bit about spirituality, sexuality, sartorial expression, and cultural identity, but I also wanted to mention humor, Prince's freedom of expression. So here's one last cloud reference for us all. In addition to the raspberry sorbet reference on the Muppets Tonight in 1996, I'd like to leave you with this image of him dancing with Cynthia Rose in the clouds. And I'm looking forward to developing this research into a chapter for my upcoming book on Prince's style, and would love to hear more from you about any Prince and cloud references I might have missed. So thank you so much.